All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. Today, we are going to be talking about um, how the U.S. got involved in World War II. Now, I know a lot of you guys already probably know it was Pearl Harbor, things like that, but today we're going to look at why did Pearl Harbor happen? Okay, we're going to be looking at that. We're going to be looking also at some of the first battles that were done in the Pacific. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Here's the objective. We're going to analyze the events leading to the attack on Pearl Harbor. We're going to examine the significance of having Native Americans as code talkers, and then we're going to create an argument on if MacArthur had stayed with the Bataan Death March, would that have ever happened? Okay. Now here is your warm-up picture. The first question asks you to analyze this picture and tell me what is going on. Now, if you know anything about trees and like how they work and uh, what's needed for a tree to stay still, in a certain area, then you have a good idea about what this picture is trying to say. Okay, but if you don't, you can still get a good idea. All right. The second question asks you, what do you think this artist, which is Dr. Seuss, what do you think he's trying to say about the American First Group? Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about them, but yeah, so what do you think he's trying to say about them? Okay, so pause the video, write your response because we're moving on in three, two, one. Now, here's the thing. Um, at this point in the World War II, the Nazis have already controlled the French government. They set up a puppet government. What that means is the Nazis control France, but there is a government of France was being controlled by the Nazis. The French government is not looking towards the French people saying, "Oh, is this good? Is this okay? Is this what you guys want?" They're looking at the Nazis saying, "Is this okay? Is this all right? Is this what we should say?" So Japan, which are allies with the Nazis, basically invade French Indochina. But what they do is they ask permission from the French government. They're like, "Oh, can we come into Indochina?" And the French government's like, again, remember, they're a puppet government. They're like, "Yes, of course. Come and enjoy French Indochina. Enjoy your time there. Take what you want." Everyone knows that this is complete crap. They know for a fact that the French government is controlled by the Nazis. But legally, it is the French government saying this to the Japanese, allowing them inside. So it's technically not an invasion. Um, but the American and the British countries are so upset. They are livid over this. Okay. Not only for the reasons I just stated, but also they had troops nearby. They had troops in like Vietnam and Korea, in the Philippines, places like that. So they were really close. The Japanese were really close to where their soldiers were. So what Britain and the United States decided to do was hit them with embargoes on their goods. Okay, remember Japan's an island. A lot of the stuff they get um, that they need come from other parts of the world. And one of the things they really need is oil. And at that time, the United States controlled 70% of the oil that Japan got. Now, they had about 3 years worth of reserves. Okay. But since they were going to war, you basically had to cut that in half. So they had about a year and a half worth of oil to use. And Emperor Hirohito was like, "Yeah, no, that's not going to work." So, in response to the United States cutting off that 70% of the oil, um, the Japanese attacked Malaya. Now, why is Malaya so important? Well, because at that time, the United States and Malaya were good friends. And in fact, they were trading stuff with us that we needed. Things like rice, rubber, and tin. You know, we need those things, and now we got cut off from that. So the US, in response to that, responds by cutting off all of the Japanese oil. The other 30% they were getting their oil from, the United States made a deal with those countries saying, hey, you know what? Don't sell them the oil. You're going to lose business with us. And so a lot of those countries sided with us. So not only were the oil cut off, but they also froze all the Japanese assets in the US and cut off completely the oil supply. This is where Japan's like, whoa, 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 guys. Okay, let's cool our jets. Let's talk peace. But you're gonna find out in a second, it's all for nothing. So December 7th, 1941, at 6:10 in the morning, um, a U.S. ship spots a Japanese submarine periscope coming out of the water. You know, the Americans see the periscope and they realize like, hey, well, there's none of our submarines around here. You know, and it's not till later they realize that was a Japanese submarine. At 7:30, so about an hour and a half later, um, the United States get a line of communication from Japan stating the peace talks are over. There's no more peace talks between the United States and Japan. 25 minutes later, the U.S. Navy port at Pearl Harbor is under attack. Now, like I told my other classes, guys, even nowadays with the fastest jets and stuff like that, it takes more than 25 minutes to go from Japan to Hawaii. Okay? They planned this. When they were talking, oh, let's have peace, let's talk about this, they were planning an attack. And they set up, it's like chess. You set up your pieces, and then when the moment's right, you attack. And that's exactly what Japan has done. While they were talking about peace and things like that, they were moving their ships and the planes and things like that close by. And then when December 7th came by, they were within a proximity to make their attacks. Thing is, December 7th of 1941, it was a Sunday. A lot of soldiers were still sleeping on the ships. Some were barely getting up. Some were, like taking a shower and things like that. There were also some who were already up. They were, the skeleton crew. They were cleaning the decks. They were getting things ready for the day, you know. But when the Japanese came in, um, they were flying really, really low. Some of the eyewitnesses at that time said the planes were so low you could see the red dot on the planes. You know. Um, Now the Japanese captain who was in charge of this mission, I'm gonna kill his name, Mitsuo Fushida. His job was to assess while flying low, to look around and then make the judgment call of attack or don't attack. And he gives the signal to attack by saying, breaking radio silence and saying, Tora, Tora, Tora. Okay. The Japanese, when they sent these planes to attack, they sent three waves. The first attack, which was where Fushida was in, as soon as they heard Tora, 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 they dropped their bombs, they started shooting their guns and things like that, blowing up ships and places, stuff like that. The next wave came through doing the same thing, aiming for the bigger ships and stuff, shooting at people, shooting at the submarines, submarines, the battleships and things like that. And the third wave is where we, United States, we we're now alert. We're ready. We got the planes, and we shot down some Japanese planes. So 353 Japanese airplanes attacked, and we shot down 29 of them. Um, they, however, did a lot of damage to our Navy. They sunk almost 100 ships, including three of the biggest battleships at that time, which were the USS Oklahoma, the USS Utah, and the USS Arizona. Okay. 2,404 military and civilians lost their lives that day. Uh, 1,177 of those people came from the Arizona alone. So there was quite a bit of people inside the USS Arizona. And it sank quick. So that's why the number was so high on that. There wasn't enough time for the people to get out. Now, while the attack was happening, like the first, second wave, the wire messages were being sent out to the mainland and then made its way to the president. By the time FDR got a hold of the first letter saying we are under attack, he was like, "Well, is it done?" And they're like, "It's barely starting. It's still going on. We think we don't know." And that's the thing you have to remember. It's not like nowadays where if something happened somewhere, you get an instant message right away. It's already on CNN and it's already on Fox News, all these channels. But back then, it took a while just to make communication from one part of the country to the next, or from one side to the other. Okay? It wasn't instantaneous, it took time. And by the time FDR is hearing about this whole stuff is already going through. Now, I was going to show you guys the video clip of FDR giving the Day of Infamy speech, asking Congress for a declaration of war. But the thing is, since I don't have the rights to that video, they won't let me to show it. So, oh well. But the thing is, you can always watch that video on your own. But here's your first question. Do you think that Japan really wanted to bring the US into the war? Why do you think this? So remember, they invaded Indochina. We, you know, cut off 70% of their oil. In response to that, they attacked Malaya. In response to that, we cut off their oil completely. And in response to that, they attacked Pearl Harbor. So it's kind of like we're hitting them, they're slapping us. We're hitting them, they're slapping us, back and forth type of thing. Do you think they were trying to hit us, or do you think they really wanted to? They really wanted to bring us into World War II. So, what do you think? So, pause the video, think about it, write your response, okay? Because we're moving on in three, two, one. Now, America First. This was a group led by an American hero called Charles Lindbergh. Charles Lindbergh sailed the Atlantic Ocean by himself, and he was like a world hero. Thing is, these guys felt that the United States should stay out of the war completely. There should be no reason why we join the war. We need to take care of ourselves first. Let those other people deal with their problems. We are Americans. Let us deal with our own problems. But as soon as Pearl Harbor happened, this group just faded away into history because now everyone was upset about Pearl Harbor. And if one of these group people try to say, well, no, we should not be joining, they'd be like, really, we should just let Japan get away with bombing our people and things like that. So those people, America First, used to have these little buttons they used to wear proudly. Oh yes, I'm part of the American First group. And then as soon as Pearl Harbor happened, those buttons went away and gone. Uh, because we declared war on Japan on December 11th, 1941, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. About a month later, in January 13th and 14th, 8 vessels are blown up by German U-boats in Manhattan. Okay, and within another 2 weeks, another 25 ships are destroyed on the East Coast. They're sunk. 6 months, within 6 months, by June, 230 ships were sunk all along the East Coast, carrying about 5 million tons of material. These are plane parts, these are tanks, these are jeeps, these are ammunitions, guns, food, medical supplies, all that stuff. 5 million tons of it sank to the bottom of the ocean. Okay. Now that the whole world is basically in another world war, Hitler's like, well, you know what? Might keep it a secret. And he basically shouted out to the world, he declares the final solution. The final solution is the extermination of the Jewish people in Europe. It's a genocide. Anytime you kill a group of people based off their ethnicity, their religion, things like that, that's a genocide. And that's what Hitler's trying to do. He's trying to wipe out all the Jewish people in Europe. So in February of 1942, the United States is like, okay, well, we need to figure out this code system because the Germans have this code, this Enigma code. It's impossible to break. We need something that we can have that nobody else has, that nobody else can break, a code that nobody else can even possibly try to understand. So this guy, Philip Johnson, suggested, well, why don't we use like Native Americans, specifically Navajo Indians? Why don't we have them transmit codes? And the military people were thinking, they're like, dang, that's a good idea. Yeah, yeah. Why didn't anybody think of this? This is smart. So they became known as code talkers. Okay. All right. So here's your next question. What are some benefits to having a Navajo Indian as a code talker? All right. So think about stuff like, where are Native Americans from? How many people speak that language? How can you learn that language? And think not now. I'm talking about back in 1941, 1942. Okay. So think about it. Pause the video. Okay, because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right. So February 19th, 1942, President Roosevelt signs Executive Order 9066. What this does, it detained people who were seen as a national risk, specifically aiming at Japanese Americans. Okay, because back then, when Pearl Harbor happened, a lot of people were angry at the Japanese Americans, like, oh, I bet your cousin attacked us. Oh, did you give them secrets? Did you tell them stuff? People were saying stuff to Japanese Americans who they don't know what the heck's going on. Some of them have been in this country for more than 50 years. Their grandparents moved here, back in the 1800s. But because they're Japanese American, they're met with hostility. Same thing happened with September 11th. A lot of Muslim Americans were attacked, and people said things to them, and it's like, this person had nothing to do with that. This person doesn't know them. They're not related to them. You know, they've been living here forever. They love this country just as much as you do. So why are you hassling them? Just because they're the same religion. You know, so that was a thing. So 110,000 Japanese Americans were forced to leave their homes, quit their jobs, and basically take whatever they could carry with them and be shipped off. Now, where you guys live in Fresno, uh, at the fairgrounds, I was told that there's a plaque that commemorates that and says this is the area where Japanese Americans were kept. You know, here in Tulare, we have that at the fairgrounds. That's what everyone knows that here. That this was a temporary campsite where the fairgrounds was, you know. And they would basically gather them and send them off to places like Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, South Dakota, places right in the middle of the country. But here's the thing: they say it as, "Oh, these guys, we're doing this because of national risk." Well, the Germans, as you saw from the last slide, they attacked our ships. Why didn't we round up German Americans? Or why didn't we round up Italian Americans? Why focus only on Japan? Because we had a hatred. The United States had uh, already the Chinese Exclusion Act was still going on at this time. So Asian Americans were looked down upon, and that's why it was easy for them to pick on the Japanese Americans. Okay. March 11th, General Douglas MacArthur, the guy right there in the picture, see with the corn cob pipe, he was ordered by the president to leave the Philippines. He's like, all right, I'll leave. I'm going to bring my men. And Roosevelt's like, no, leave your men behind. I need you to come. And MacArthur's like, I don't want to leave my men, but the president is telling me, he's the commander in chief. He's telling me he needs me. So, okay. So he tells his men, I shall return. He gets on the boat and he goes. He is later told 6 days later, you are the supreme commander of the Allied forces in the Pacific. So he's now the head honcho guy out here in the Pacific. He's basically brought up to date. This is how many ships we got, how many carriers, destroyers, planes. This is the kind of weapons we have. What can we do? What should we do? You know. Now, while he's gone, the Japanese attacked the Philippines, and the U.S. troops and Filipino troops are captured. In total, there was 78,000 of them that were captured. This is the largest amount of U.S. soldiers that are ever captured. Now, the Japanese have a POW camp on the other side of the Philippines. So the captured soldiers have to walk through this scorching hot jungle filled with venomous snakes and spiders and things like that. They have to march 65 miles. So they do. Um, some people are beaten, some are shot and killed by the Japanese. Some die when they get to the POW camp because they drink dirty water that had malaria in it and things like that. So that march became known as the Bataan Death March. Now, April 18th, America completes its first secret attack on the Japanese island. But the problem is they couldn't get as close as they wanted to. So they only went to a certain distance, and then they basically told the pilots, you're going to have to crash land either in the Pacific Ocean or in China. So 16 B-25 bombers, led by Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle, go right by Japan, drop bombs on Tokyo, Kobe, Yokohama, and Nagoya. And as they're turning, they're like, okay, well, let's see how far we can get. Some crash into the ocean, some crash in China. Doolittle's plane crashes in China, and what ends up happening is, remember, Japan and China are fighting, and Chinese underground soldiers see Doolittle and his men. They're like, who are you guys? What are you doing here? Things like that. You guys trying to attack us too? And they're like, no, we just attacked Japan. We dropped bombs on them. And the Chinese were like, wait, you guys attacked China? Or do you guys attack Japan? And they're like, yeah, we don't like Japan. And they're like, we don't like them too. Oh my God, heck yeah. So the old proverb of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, in this case, it's true. The United States don't like the Japanese, and the Japanese and Chinese don't get along. So The United States and Chinese are going to get along because they both have the same enemy, Japan. So the underground Chinese soldiers help Doolittle get back home and help him and his men get back home. All right, so here's my next question for you. Why do you think the president ordered MacArthur to come but leave his men behind? Why do you think he told him, no, no, just leave your men, you come, leave your men behind? Why do you think he wanted them to stay on in the Philippine Islands? So what do you think? So pause the video, write your response, okay, because we're moving on in three, two, one. Now the code talkers, they start their training. Okay, there's about 420 of them who would eventually be deployed in the Pacific. Now you're gonna get an assignment next week. You're gonna get like a little code thing, and you guys are gonna decipher the codes and stuff like that. And you have to remember, this is Native American talk. This is something that is not spoken anywhere else around the world. It's not like people could take classes on it. And with our U.S. bad history with Native Americans, there weren't that many Native Americans left. So it was unique and it was impressive. And the code talkers would use things like the word turtle. Let's say I'm just tossing it out there. Yahi-hu. Okay, let's say that means turtle. That would literally translate into the English terms as like tank, things like that. So they could be like four tanks. So it'd be like you, Yahi, the word tank for and then here, and they'd say the position and things like that. Um, so they're going through the training, and again, you'll have an activity next week to deal with that. Now, the Battle of the Coral Sea. This is the first time that air dogfights, the air fighting, actually happened over the sea. Now, I had a student in class tell me, well, what about World War One? Yes, there was dogfighting, airplane versus airplane in World War One, but they fought over land. You know, they didn't really fight in the ocean where if you get shot down, there's no land area where you can try to, maneuver and land. No, this is the ocean. If you land in the water, you're gonna sink. You know, so the U.S. wins, and this is a great defensive point because now we got a foothold on the islands. So even if we attack another place and we lose, we can always come back and regroup and things like that. So we have an island to call our own. Okay, and this is where MacArthur does his island hopping, going from one place to another, to another, to another, to another, conquering, and we get more land and more territory so we can put tanks and fuel and things, whatever we need, at those places. Now, at the Battle of Midway, Japan had an idea that they should go back to Hawaii because remember, the Navy is pretty hurt. It's hurt pretty bad. So the plan is for them to go back to Hawaii, surround it, and basically invade it and keep it hostage, and tell the United States get out of the war, or we're gonna kill everyone and we're gonna take this territory. You know that was their plan. Problem was, we had some great cryptographers listening in to what Japan was saying, and they were breaking their codes, and they found out about this plan. So they said, okay, let's set up a defensive perimeter, and when Japan comes, we'll be ready for them. This is the first time in 350 years that Japan loses a navy battle. And they didn't fight people who were just tinier than them. They fought countries like Japan, or sorry, like Russia in the Russo-Japanese War. They defeated Russia, so they didn't win against little tiny countries. They won against big countries. But because the United States heard the transition and the Japanese were not prepared for it, they were badly beaten at the Battle of Midway, which is that little um, chunk of land you see right there in this picture. That's Midway. That's it. It's a tiny place. Japan lost 3,500 men, 4 carriers, 1 cruiser, and 332 planes. That's quite a bit. The U.S. lost 307 men, 1 carrier, and 150 airplanes. Not bad. Not bad. So here's your exit ticket. Do you think Japan would have invaded the U.S. mainland if we lost the Battle of Midway? Because here's the thing you have to remember there's no forts or army bases anywhere on the West Coast. The closest one is like in Kansas. So do you think Japan would have been like, you know what? Hey, let's invade the United States. There's no soldiers there, it's just civilians. Let's just attack, the mainland of the United States. Or do you think it'd have been like, no, we have a plan to invade, to capture Hawaii and hold it hostage. Let's stick to that plan. So what do you think they would have done? Would they have invaded, or do you think they'd be like, no, no, let's just stick to the original plan? And why did you choose that one? Okay. So once you've written that response, okay, then you're done for this lesson. Okay. So hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Okay. Um, I will see you guys later. You guys, you take care. You be safe. Okay.